I would like to introduce to the stage Mr. Aaron Fu. He is the Managing Director at MIST. He is a strategic advisor and entrepreneur in his own right. Please come on stage, a round of applause. So he'll be moderating this panel about incubating young entrepreneurs and creating the environment for them where they can impact the kind of change that they wish to. Joining him is Mr. Adnan Adiwi. I hope I said that right. He is a yes, a round of applause. He is a social impact enthusiast and an Ashoka Fellow. And last but definitely not least is Mr. Clinton Liederman, who is the founding member of R Labs, an innovation hub, is that right? Incubator innovation hub based in Cape Town. So yes, a round of applause. And that's your panel. My work here is done. Have fun, good luck.
Cool, thanks guys. Just looking at that video, I don't think it got a big enough round of applause as it should have, because that's a fucking amazing initiative. That's amazing. So you know, this hits home very much for me because I built and sold my first software business when I was 14, and that really opened my eyes to a whole bunch of possibilities. And I didn't have any support like this, so this is such an amazing resource. So thanks, you guys are doing an amazing job. So maybe just a few words about MES, so there's a context here. So MES hopes to take some of the graduates from my esteemed colleagues' programs and really build them into globally successful entrepreneurs. So one of the companies that we work with, it's based in Ghana, it sells to the US, it's an e-commerce company, but it hires in Kenya and it hires in South Africa as well, so really creating sort of that Pan-African force. But I'd love my panelists to maybe tell us a little bit more about what they do in themselves. I know introduction was great, but maybe let's go a little bit deeper on each one.
Well, I think I'm representing North Africa in this conference because usually when we speak about Africa, North Africa is not usually part of the equation. And I was once at a very esteemed conference in London by the LBS, and somebody was asking me, oh, where are you from? And I was like, Morocco. She said, oh, wrong side of Africa. Because when you usually talk about entrepreneurship, it's mostly sub-Saharan Africa. And what I'm specializing even from is very, very young entrepreneurs. We were just talking with Aaron, because I started at age 14, 13. And I definitely believe that it's never too early to start. And the things that I do is basically how to ignite confidence from parents, teachers, students, communities, NGOs, everyone. If you want to do something, just go and do it.
Hi, good morning. Still morning? No, afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Cape Town, from a place called the Cape Flats. Who's all heard about the Cape Flats? I'm sure there's lots of colorful stories you've heard about that. So I'm here representing that today. And yes, we work with young people growing up in very, very difficult circumstances. And really, there's two parts to what we do. There's incubation and acceleration. So the acceleration is the second phase, incubation first, and now incubation is really, we first took a 9-month incubation. That kind of works because we're all here because of a 9-month incubation period, right? So we thought that definitely would work properly. And so we work with these young people, and it's really just about getting them ready to start their first business. We know there's a huge gap between school, and a lot of the kids that we work with didn't even finish high school. So it's a very challenging situation to work in, but very rewarding, and we love it.
It's amazing work. I just want to get a quick sense of the room. How many of you are educators or work in a school or training facility? Right, okay. Great, cool. So, you know, I think sometimes entrepreneurship is discussed as sort of an either or when it comes to formal training and building a business, right? And we were talking a little bit earlier about how your model is absolutely very collaborative within the schools, and you're able to, you know, share your expertise within the high schools. The students don't even have to leave where they are, and they're still able to build businesses which are generating, what was it, $10,000 in a couple of months?
16, yeah. Well, I think that I was also leading in Access Morocco for a couple of years, and the issue that usually comes is that when is it the right age to start? The whole dilemma of experience, expertise, and so on. I think the issue about this question is how to mobilize this ecosystem to understand that, number one, if you don't have the right resources, you can never do whatever you want. Number two, the mindset. And the mindset is not just about the young person. because I think there are so many conferences, so many events where you always have the they. They should do. The parents should do. The policymakers should do. They. So whenever we are in an environment where there's some type of exclusion, it creates a nightmare. So I've been doing this for like almost 10 years now. And every day, up until now, because Francophone Africa is very different from Anglophone Africa. So that's worth mentioning. Because mindsets are very different, and resistance to change is even higher. So if we want to talk about entrepreneurs or young entrepreneurs or any entrepreneur, there's always kind of the whole idea was like, oh God, you are a failure in your life. So that if we want to kind of bring this whole ecosystem, it's important to play this role at home, with the parents, with the teachers, in schools, with the educators, with the NGOs, and with the internships. Like so many programs where you bring people to learn about entrepreneurship with suits and ties. Doesn't work. With all my due respect to fellows who have suits and ties, but there's a challenge on walking the talk and changing the paradigm of how do we understand that entrepreneurship, first and foremost, is a mindset. And what I end up with is, because when I was working in universities, a lot of people were like saying, oh, but do they make money? Do they create a business? Is everybody meant to be an entrepreneur? I was like, no, not everybody is meant to be an entrepreneur, but everybody should have an entrepreneurial mindset. Because it's this mindset that enables you to do whatever you want to do, whenever, wherever, and it's never too late.
Cool. And Clinton, we'd love to hear from you as well, right? Like, do you feel that your program is competing against the formal education system? Do you feel it's complementing?
Competing against the formal education system, I don't think we want to compete with anything. We more wanting to create opportunities for young people to do something different. The education system is what it is, and there's Adnan spoke about the policymakers, that those are things that need to happen, and just knowing about the South African government and how long anything takes to happen, that is something that we don't want to get involved in. However, what we're wanting to do is create alternative ways for young people to learn, and creating alternative spaces. School for young people on the Cape Flats feels like prison. If you go to a school on the Cape Flats, you feel like you're in a prison. It's cold. There's no love. It's just a building with people coming to do what they need to do to get a paycheck. So the spaces we create for young people is a space where they feel valued, where they feel like they can do something different. So our spaces are created very, very strategically. We think about every single thing, and we're wanting that experience to be an experience that the young person must feel that I can do something different in this space. So competing with school, no, more creating alternative spaces.
It's really been fascinating learning about the different approaches you guys are taking, the different age groups that you guys are targeting as well. And I'm just wondering, because all of us hope to one day replicate your success. Along the journey, did you always know that this was the right model? Like, what have you learned during your time building this out that surprised you or that has changed your model?
Well, I'm surprised every day. And I think that the word success is tricky, because you were mentioning like education systems. I was just reading yesterday an article about, if I ask you what is the best education system in the world, what would you say? Best education system in the world, where? Which country? Finland, Norway. Finland. So there was a nice article yesterday about Finland saying that this is not the case. And it was actually, why Finland was mentioned as, for the last 20 years, as the best in class because of PISA ranking. PISA ranking, for those who don't know, is the single currency that any policymaker anywhere in the world would trade their policy changes for. So basically now Finland is losing PISA from being top 1 or 2 to being like 7 or 10 to East Asian countries, like Singapore, Hong Kong. But what's interesting about this article was like, it was focusing the whole idea of root learning, that if you are performing well at these problems and like being good at math and so on, your education system is good. So the main challenge I faced is whenever I talk to any decision maker, they were like, is this going to improve our PISA ranking? Is it going to improve the student ratio? Is it going to improve the allocation of teacher? like the simple answer is no. What it's going to improve is that you have people who are able to think for themselves, number one. Number two, that instead of complaining, can create solutions. And number three, fix their own backyards. And I think that the whole idea of fixing what's wrong, and because I'm driven by social impact, because I believe that entrepreneurship needs to be able to challenge status quo and create inclusivity. It's not just having the exits to the IPOs or whatever, but if people people cannot eat apps, they need to eat food. Yes. So we need to be able to provide. So the challenge of replicating the model for us was like really how to really make it low cost so that anybody, anywhere can do it. And we've been able to finish up with this. So the model, like so far, with not even $90 a year ahead, we can basically transform any 14-year-old kid into a complete troublemaker, in a positive sense, of course.
Cool. Kiz, I would love to hear from you, but I want to come back to everybody and anyone, by the way.
Okay, so
lessons learned.
Lessons learned. I think our most important lesson learned was that the entrepreneurial mindset starts at home. Starts with the parents, and very, very challenging that the young people face that we're working with is that their parents are expecting them to bring home some money. They need to put food on the table. And so going through, having to attend a program that's going to teach them how to be an entrepreneur, that's even before they're having to start the business. So sometimes they get through the program, but at the end of it, the parent now says, go and find a job. And so they end up going to ShopRite or Checkers and they become a shelf packer. And that entrepreneurial mindset is then suppressed, hopefully, just suppressed, and later on it can still come out. But the challenge that we've identified is that it starts with the parents, and so having to create something that can give the young person an opportunity to take something home while they are learning was very important for us. And it took us a while to figure it out, but the most important lesson was definitely finding ways that, because we know that investment for young people is difficult, so investors aren't going to give money, so they're not going to get a salary anytime soon. So we needed to find different ways of alternative ways of creating an income for young people.
Yeah, sure. It's also about convincing the parents and the family and the entire community more than just the individual, right? And I think, being able to allow them some sort of take back, immediate take back, I think was really
That's correct. And also the other thing about failure, it's like everyone's waiting and saying, listen, we told you, don't do this entrepreneurship thing. It's not for us. That's for the people on the other side of the tracks. You need to find a job. That's another mindset that we need to change.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue for the other side of the tracks, right? Like I think, speaking with you guys last night, I reflect a lot on like how evil and selfish maybe some of the other investors are, right? So when we look at admissions into MESS, we look at university as a minimum, postgraduate as a plus, multiple business and professional experience as again a much added plus. But you guys are making it much more accessible, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Adnan, but I think looking at your model, you're starting with people that are already in school, already in high school, potentially already on their way to a great professional job, maybe, right? Maybe. You're looking at people that might not actually be in school. Some of them might be out of school, right? How do you react to arguments that kind of say, well, look, there are very limited resources to build entrepreneurial capability on the continent. Shouldn't we be focusing on the people that are most likely to succeed, i.e. the people that might already be in school, right?
So I've worked with these three audiences. I've worked with high schools, I've worked with universities, and I've worked with people outside of the system. So high school for us was just an accessibility point, and we focused on public schools. So of course, public schools is the bottom line of inclusivity, which means that, like in many countries, it's usually those who don't have resources who go to public schools. And of course, I'm not talking about those who live far away from accessing schools. So that it was just an entry point to be able to gather people in one area. That's number one. Number two, in the first panel about investment, somebody was asking about how is it difficult to have confidence in young entrepreneurs to raise investment. Actually, I believe it's much more complicated for an organization that supports young entrepreneurs to be able to have investment, because the whole idea of like the trust barriers, like, shouldn't you be working with like educated people who are diaspora, who've been abroad, who've been to the US? Shouldn't you be doing like an IT? Like just last week, we have a very strong program with a partner, and they were like, but why aren't entrepreneurs coming every day? And I was like, if they come every day, that's a bad sign, because they need to be working. They need to be working in their field. And they were like, oh, but we're gonna cut your funding because attendance rate is low. And I was like, if it was high, I think we should stop all of it. So that's the second. The third one is the whole idea of impact and inclusivity. So like, I personally, I'm not interested in the next Google or next Facebook or whatever. And many countries, sadly, like look at AI and blockchain and everything as the next hype, that we need to be on the front. But the issue of that is that it is discriminatory because it targets just one part of the solution, the very happy elite. And then the other part of the population who have access to nothing are usually left behind. So the gap is actually very high. So entry point, schools, communities, NGOs, high schools, whatever, is a starting block to be able to inspire people not to become entrepreneur, to be able to be independent. Because if you are independent, whatever situation, we've noticed that, like especially from the Enactus program, the employability rates were extremely high because students have gone through an entrepreneurial venture. So because the policymakers love employability more than entrepreneurship, because it's like it's easy. It's like, oh, you just bring a factory and bring this kind of manufacturing and then get the jobs. But it's lazy. So to final up with the challenges is the inclusivity part is across the board. And one of our successes, actually, we have a mother of one of our high school students. She started her own project because her daughter kept on harassing her every single day. And she was like, Mom, every day. And then she came to her, she was like, I got too tired of her telling me it's possible. So I decided to do something for myself. So which means that change happened both ways.
That's really cool. Before we leave, I'm actually super curious about the segment that you've honed into, right? So you've done, was it 14 to 17, right?
We have many programs, but like starting from 14.
But why did you pick that age? Why not 18 to 21? Why not 10 to 14?
So it was the first year of high school. So there's a start of maturity and start of growth, and also this is the year where people start to think about their careers and think about the future. We did the pilot for middle school because we were in French system, collège, but it was a bit difficult to be able to align with that. But we're starting a pilot next year, hopefully with age 8. It's never too late to start.
Cool, and Clinton, we'd love to hear from you as well. Like, we talked a little bit earlier around, where we should focus our resources to build entrepreneurial capability. You're clearly trying to offer it to be as inclusive as possible. Do you feel it's realistic to, in this audience, create like truly strong businesses, or is it a pathway towards employability? Because I totally agree with you that like most employers I speak to, the first things they ask for are, can they be entrepreneurial, can they be independent, and I would love to bring them in, right? And we talked a little bit about how some of these businesses are potentially a pathway towards employment later on too. So like, how do you?
Okay, I think for us it was not about, firstly, not about creating entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial businesses. It's more about the young person, investing in the young person first, and then creating a space and an opportunity for them to explore a possible business. So it's around a huge focus on social impact. So what we do is we say, go in your community, you live in this community, identify some of the challenges that you are facing as a young person. You are the problem expert. You know exactly what is wrong. And so our belief is that if you're the problem expert, it is probably you're the best person that's going to come up with a solution for that problem, because you know what doesn't work. You've experienced this problem on a daily basis, and so you create a prototype and you go and test. And we encourage young people, and I agree with Adnan. It's about going out into the field. It's not about coming into the office and spending hours on the internet. And yes, there's time for research, but it's more about going out and testing, working in the community, come back, let's talk about what worked and what didn't work, and if it, and it's more about that process more than the business, or that might be the outcome of it. It's more about what are we learning, and that is probably the lessons they're going to take forward into the next venture. They are more confident in themselves, because that is really what we're doing. We're wanting them to become more confident and believe that they can do something, then they can create, and they can be the change that they want to see in their communities.
Yeah, I think so much of this is just about mindset, right? Like, and I think that statement around if we're doing this right, they're in the field and not with us, I think that's really, really powerful, and I kind of wish more schools did that. I do want to make sure there's enough time for questions, but before we dive into that, maybe one last thing from me is, there are a lot of educators in the room working with a lot of cohorts, and I'm sure many of them would love to see them involved in your programs. What do you wish that they would be doing to better prepare their students and their cohorts for participation in your programs? Because you've clearly seen the kinds of people that have been more successful and less successful in your programs.
Well, I think don't teach. Like don't teach. Because even though I am a professor in universities and I teach entrepreneurship courses, but you cannot teach entrepreneurship. Like I have a very good example. Like I teach at a very elite private school, which costs $20,000 a semester. At the same time, I teach at a public university. My best students are the public university, not the $20,000 a semester. Because there is kind of a sense of it's given. I can do it. It's me. So I think that the whole idea if you're an educator is walking the talk. And the issue with that, in my team, all of our staff have already done projects, all of them. You cannot mentor a project if you've not been into a project yourself. That's number one. The challenge is that because they're always bright people, they leave, they do stuff. So for me, it's a challenge because it's been 10 years I've been doing this. It's very hard to keep them because they're so good at what they do. And one of them has been hired by McKinsey, and he's been the first public school, coming really from a very, very humble background. He was top on the list. Why? Because he developed every skill possible from the field. So kind of a recommendation is reversing the mindset, less teaching, more experience, and more on the field. And I totally agree what Lynn said about that if you are in a mess, you're the best person to if you have the perspective. Because sometimes when you are in a situation and you don't understand the other kind of perspectives around it, you just think about it's doomed, it's in the world. But if you change the way you use your glasses and talk with the educators on perspectives, you can create something that sometimes can change the whole situation.
Wow. So schools don't teach.
I would say get the young people ready for. We now hear about the fourth industrial revolution and being future fit. We realized this way back in 2012 that our young people just aren't ready for the job market. They aren't ready to start businesses. They first need to learn skills that is going to be able to help them grow their business, to be able to get their foot in the door, to get that job, so that even if they're not an entrepreneur, they still have that entrepreneurial mindset that is going to give them the edge in the job that they're doing. So I would say, yes, we have to teach them maths and all of these very important subjects. But there's the other things that I've a personal opinion. I think that our schooling system is designed to spoon feed. There's no room for the kids to think for themselves. You get told what time the next lesson is. You get told what time is interval. You get told you have to study now, and then your exam is then. There's no room for to explore and to try something different. It's just everything is set in stone. So create the space for young people to start interacting with one another and give them the opportunity to explore and come up with crazy ideas. At our labs, when the young people come and they say, we have this crazy idea, and then the first thing we think is, yes, this is very crazy, but yeah, go for it, do it. And we know that it's something that's been tried a million times, but it's not about the idea, it's more about them going through that process and and learning to discover new things and start to activate other parts of their brain that hasn't been activated in school.
Can I add something to this?
Please.
We named our program Dare. Dare in our mother tongue means do. And also it's a kind of wordplay with daring. So like whenever somebody comes, we've called everything Dare, like Dare Space, Dare, whatever, all of it. Like whenever somebody comes, it's like, I want to do something, like the first instinct is do, before telling us if it's a good idea or bad idea. Because like sometimes when you give a judgment about something, like it's a bias into this. So like, and I think that yesterday during dinner we were talking about the power of bringing people together, of residences in boarding schools, like for young people. So we tried doing programs for parents and teachers and taking them outside of their families in their homes. The transformative process that happened for teachers was the best that you could ever think. We had a 55-year-old physics teacher who played with the balloon. It was the first time in his life since he was 8 touching a balloon for himself, not for his kids. And this is how you can really transform people, by giving them and walking the talk. Like if you want to teach something to someone, well, you should leave it. And this doesn't cost thousands of dollars. It's simple. It's just shifting resources.
I mean, walk the talk is fascinating, right? That's essentially saying that all teachers should build businesses for themselves so that they can teach their students how to build businesses. That's amazing.
Or projects.
All projects, yes, yeah. It doesn't always have to be commercial. I do want to leave some time for questions. I'm sure there's a lot of you that want to explore themes with my speakers. Anyone want to kick us off? Maybe up the front, and then we'll go up the back. Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm James from Tomorrow Trust. We try to bring holistic education from grade R, little kids, all the way into university. I love what both of you said. You spoke about love as in, all the relationship, let me say it again, all the research around learning science seems to be that a mindset comes out of your environment, right? A combination of the quality of the relationships, feeling like you belong, and the quality of the challenges, having opportunities to try and fail things. So I just love you to both to talk a bit more about some practical examples of ways you actually make young people feel like they belong, and then the pedagogical stuff, how you actually get them to try things.
Okay, I think I'll go first. One great example of this is a young person named Alan. He heads up probably our most exciting, this is biased, my most exciting project at our labs called Zlato. So Zlato is a rewards program for doing good. We came up with a program in our youth cafe for young people to be able to purchase anything at the cafe, but we realized that, so that when I say anything, I'm talking about time on the internet or a meal, a cup of coffee. So we realized that there's kids that come there that have money, disposable income at home, and then there's those that don't have. And so there's this gap that we didn't want this to happen in the cafe. So we had to level the playing field and said, let's create something that everybody has to then earn Zlato in order to buy anything at the cafe. So how you earn Zlato is you have to attend sessions, so we call that personal development. So they attend a session that they basically going to be learning, let's say entrepreneurship. So they get paid Zlato for this, it's a digital currency, and they can now take Zlato and they can buy a muffin or a sandwich or coffee. So everybody has to earn Zlato in order to purchase anything. So your money means nothing in the cafe, or your lack of money means nothing in the cafe. So we're all on the same playing field. So Alan was one of the first adopters of the Zlato program, and then Alan was very interested in taking this, in how we can make it more accessible and more usable in the real world outside of the cafe. And so Alan now heads up the Zlato program. And he has really just taken the program to the next level. Last year they won the Google Impact Award, and we're now setting up an office in the US. And so Alan is just the perfect example of what we've done with giving, not just giving youth responsibilities, but actually trusting them to lead. And so that is what we do in most of our programs is, listen, you guys have been, and 90% of 95% of the R-Lab staff are beneficiaries that have, I don't like that word, people that have come through our training programs. So we put them on the forefront and say, listen, you guys have to innovate this program. We need to keep innovating and making sure that we are always relevant. And so they're the ones that's heading up most of our programs. And so that is the model that we take to make sure that young people are given the opportunity to just be themselves, but at the same time create meaningful, sustainable social impact.
I have 3 examples, one age 14, one 17, and one 21. So different age groups and different mindsets. So the one that started with 14, like in most schools, public schools, a lot of people complain about their schooling. Textbooks boring, everything's boring, teachers are boring. So this is from a small town next to the capital, but like a very small town. And they were like complaining that actually school was boring. And they were like, they didn't learn anything at school. So our methodology basically says like, if you don't like something, change it. It's like, just don't complain. So it's really problem solving at heart. So they've been challenged to, if they didn't like the way the courses were given or the content, they needed to find a new way. So this is what they did. So they started by like talking to all of their classmates, like 500 students. And they were like, what don't you like in the school? Like in the curriculum? Is it the way of teaching? Is it the colors? Is like, and they came up with like, there was too much text. And people used to learn things by heart. And of course, they learn an exam. The day after the exam, nothing's there. Yeah. Nothing. So they were like, if you were to come up with a solution, what would that be? Like, well, we love mangas, like comic books. And we love like things that engage us. So they designed their first prototype. They like wrote handwritten stories, like on chemistry, history, physics, math. And then they asked their teammates, like, who knows how to draw? It was really, really low budget, low cost MVP, just like 0. And they designed a first magazine. They sold 300 copies in their own high school. The demand was so huge that it was actually more than they thought. Because we do every year an innovation prize for education. They won our first prize. So when I saw this project, I was like, this is something like $1 million company. So we linked them with artists. So actually they designed a comic book, like a real, and I showed it to you, a real comic book with first year high school, like all school subjects. They worked with teachers, they did mind maps and cartoons, and they called it Uncle or Hal, it's like Ibn Battuta, it's like a traveler. So it was through the eyes of the traveler that they designed the curriculum. Second prototype done, they successfully pre-sold it, they sold around 2,000 copies, and there was like, they started receiving orders like from everywhere, from Germany, from France, from the US, people asking them to implement the same methodology in the content. That's 14. The other ones, they did to the program, they finished, but they didn't have a project. But they saw that these ones were able to do something. They were like, we want to do something ourselves. In our school, we didn't have IT. It was like, technology was like very bad. And they were like, why don't we launch a program for girls to learn how to code and technology from age 8? They did that last year. Because they saw that others were able to do it, and because the question was like, why not? The third project, this was an Enactus project, age 19, is from medical education. And he's an Anzisha fellow from last year. So they were like, medical education is boring. It's boring and long, and at the end, people forget everything they've learned. So they were like, how do we transform medical education to make it more engaging, to have soft skills, communication, not just learning by heart. And at the same time, providing access to healthcare to people who don't have access to healthcare through kind of learning expeditions. So they designed a program called Step Out, where basically they take medical education students, they provide them mentorship with doctors so that they have first-hand experience and talk with real patients. They've trained around 500 doctors, like in just 2 years. Like $50,000 revenue. And then it's not financially sustainable because they wanted to make it affordable. They don't want it to be like an elite. So they're designing like new ways. How can we reach more doctors? 3 examples, problem solving, apply to any subject, and you can reinvent different things, but you need to be able to understand the root cause. And to go back to what you said, if you don't understand the problem, you cannot fix it.
Sure. I have a mic, by the way. Just entrepreneur. Good day. My name is Franz. Firstly, thanks for the great work that you're doing. And my first question is to your incubator in Cape Town. Any chances that we might see you expanding to other townships like Khayelitsha? And secondly, would be, we know that parents, particularly in South Africa, they're not that supportive. And my question is, how then do you continuously engage parents so that they can start understanding entrepreneurship as a whole? And thirdly would be, for those who are not actually your beneficiaries at that time, how do you continuously engage them in social spaces, in social media, so that by the time they get into the program, they actually have an idea of the work that you do? Thank you.
Okay, 3 questions. I'll go with the first one first. You're probably going to have to remind me what's 2 and 3 again. For the first one, expanding, we definitely are looking at expanding into different communities. We are currently based in Bridgetown, and we have some students that come from Khayelitsha and other communities on the Cape Flats. So what we're doing is we're looking at going to different communities and creating hubs, innovation hubs or youth spaces. And we're doing that through partnerships. So very soon we would be branching out into different spaces. I think officially we announced on Friday our joint venture with Naspers. So that is going to be looking at taking our lab, which is going to be called Naspers Labs, into different communities. So basically, wherever there is a ShopRite, there's going to be a Naspers Labs, because that is the community we know that we are serving is the same people who buys from ShopRite. So yes, that is going to be happening soon. Your second question was around parents, engaging parents. We're still trying to figure this one out. To be honest, our programs is more geared at changing the mindset of the young person, and them taking that back into their homes. And through that, we've already seen a lot of shift in mindset with parents now becoming more supportive. They're still very cautious, but becoming more supportive because of the measures we've put in place in order for young people to be able to find alternative ways of earning some sort of money, which is like Zlato, for instance, where they can go and they can use their Zlato now, not only just in the cafes, but in the real world, and they can go to ShopRite and they can actually go, and the money that they've earned by doing good in the community, they can now use that money and go and buy groceries and take that back home. So changing parents' mindsets, that is the approach we're taking, finding alternative ways. It's difficult to work with parents because they've already got their minds like, people are hungry, people want to eat, and there's nothing you can fight around that. And so the challenges are real, and so we have to come up with real solutions. And for young people, getting them engaged, we're very active on social media. And so we can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and that is where we engage most with our community, both young and old.
Cool. It sounds like there's a whole other panel that we can do around how to work with parents and make sure that they let their kids go. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thanks so much for sharing your insights. To me, some of the top things that I got out of this was, create a space for them to explore. Make sure you push them out there. Don't keep them in the classroom. I think the second thing, of course, is it's great that, your programs are being led by people like yourselves who've been out there and built businesses. How do we make more teachers actually go out there and build products and businesses so they can teach by doing? And I guess, one final bit for me was, entrepreneurship might not be entrepreneurship for entrepreneurship's sake. It could be entrepreneurship to eventually get a job, but to eventually become very highly employable. And I think that could be maybe one of the secret sauces for working with parents too. So thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, guys, please give them a big round of applause.